We continue with our fast-moving coverage of those developments there in Ukraine and Crimea here on RT International. And cross live now to the UK. David Coburn, he's a British MP from the UK Independence Party. He's joining us from Scotland, from Glasgow. David, Ukraine and EU, we understand, are about to sign the political element of this contentious association agreement. So, in effect, if that's signed, is it a done deal now, then?
Well, I should think it is. I mean, this whole situation is farcical. It's all created by the EU being overambitious and interfering in the Russian sphere of influence, which they have no right to do. It's very, very dangerous. Quite frankly, they've made promises to the Ukraine which they can't fulfill. There's no money left. They've destroyed the European economy with Spain, Italy, Greece, and various other countries. There is no money to back up the Ukraine, and they've made rash promises which they can't fulfill.
So let me ask you, why would they want another bankrupt country to join the ranks of other struggling EU economies?
You very well might ask. I couldn't possibly tell you what's in their minds, quite frankly. It's as crazy as everything else the European Union do. Baroness Ashton, who's their alleged foreign minister, I mean, the only reason she's there is because she's a friend of Tony Blair. She's not qualified for the job, and it's very, very dangerous when the European Union start interfering in the Russian sphere of influence, and you have politicians or people of her caliber who, quite frankly, are not up to it. And this is a very dangerous thing to be doing. When the wall came down, it was very clear who had which spheres of influence, and quite frankly, the Russians are just protecting themselves, as they have every right to do. Britain should be calming this whole situation down, and the European Union should be a lot less ambitious, and it's entirely their fault that this situation has arisen. They brought us practically to the brink of war. It's absolutely outrageous.
Is every member of the EU really behind those vociferous leaders wanting to join Ukraine? Is everybody behind them in Europe? Is there a unity over this issue?
No, I think that everybody's very worried about gas and oil. I think that's very important to the Western economies. We can't start threatening the Russians. The Russians can't threaten us. I mean, we have interlinked businesses nowadays. We simply can't do this sort of thing. As for the ludicrous things the British government have done to Russian businessmen and Russian members of the parliament and Russian leaders, this is not the way for the City of London or anything else to operate.
Right, well, I was going to ask you about that, the effects of those sanctions supposedly harming various members of the Russian government and indeed the former Kiev government, but European leaders are very worried.
A good way of
certainly worried of it basically being a backlash and backfiring on them economically. Just how damaging could those sanctions be on a struggling EU?
Well, I think, we can have this tit-for-tat action going on forever, if you like, but it's absolutely ridiculous. We need to do business with Russia. Russia is a serious player in the world. We cannot start mucking about with their bank accounts or seizing their money, all this sort of thing. What sort of serious, why would anyone invest in the City of London if we're going to do things like that? It's an absolutely ridiculous thing to do. We should be trying to ratchet this thing down and come to some sort of amicable arrangement. The whole thing, as I said before, is entirely caused by the European Union becoming far too adventurous in areas they have no ability to do anything about.
And just briefly and finally, why are European officials actually ignoring the extremist element within this Kiev government? We've been carrying footage today of a head of a TV channel being forcefully removed, forcefully resigning. Those sort of stories emerging now concerning this new government, but why is that being overlooked by EU leaders?
Well, I would hardly say that quite frankly, I don't think the previous president of the Ukraine was a tremendous example of good government or good governance. I mean, he seemed to acquire rather a lot of money, allegedly. But the thing is that that's neither here nor there. We should not be interfering in what is effectively the Russian sphere of influence.
David Coburn.